First of all, it's really great to be here in person. I've seen many of you on these rectangles quite a bit over the last weeks, and I think that we are still bodies in space is fantastic to feel. And since we are a small group, I would like for us to know each other's names, and I would say it would be great. I mean, might sound really strange, it's a public event, we say our names, but still it's nice to hear the names that are gathering. So my name is Elke, and I'll pass to you.
Jelena.
And I think we missed the three people, the director, and behind the director, and then on the steps another two. Yeah, thank you for doing that. I think we will start with your work in the middle, because this is actually how the title came about. So you know how this is. It's really difficult to find titles for books, for essays, for artworks, for everything. And then we had a conversation about coming together here and speaking with and from this work. And then you shared something with me, and maybe we can just explain to the audience.
I shared one fact. The ones that were present.
Don't come too close, but you can come closer.
The ones that were present at the opening kind of might remember that there was some substance inside of this constructed pool object, and this was actually one of the cleaning agents used in professional cleaning, also in Vienna. It had been produced by an Austrian company, and I myself was using it while I was doing this job. And so you have one photo on the reminiscence of how it kind of looked like in the pool, and because we poured it without any water additionally, just concentrated 1.5 gallons of it. It ate this Fugenmasse in 3 days and went completely into the space and just filled the room. So there was an interesting action of cleaning the leftovers of the work, all this kind of small incident, but actually this incident I found a very interesting point to start with, because it really shows, maybe even much better than this kind of don't touch this neon pink liquid. It shows what this cleaning agent does. Not only, in this case, it's clear that it does something to the Fliesenmasse, but actually it does something to human hands as well that we cannot see, because this could develop in 3 days, but having in mind years and years of work, we can assume what happens, but not so gradually, let's say, what happens gradually to the people who actually come in contact with these substances during their work. So the cleaning agent was taken as a title. Yes, because of course, as I said already, the cleaning agent was inside, and the cleaning agent somehow ate the object that was holding it, or was supposed to contain it.
And I think you really need to take a look at what's going on in there, because it's very much broken.
It's very broken, yes.
So the cleaning, the power, the toxicity and the power of the cleaning agent actually broke the material. And I think this is what we started talking about. I mean, so the ways in which, so all of us have experienced cleaning our homes, the environments where we live, and I have to admit, I don't know enough about what's in the cleaning agents that I use. So of course one tries to buy this or that, you all make your informed choices, but I have to admit as a cultural studies person, I'm under-informed about what is actually inside the cleaning agent. And I think this is in a way what had us thinking about the way in which these cleaning agents not only enter through the skin of those who touch the cleaning agent, even if they protect their hands with another complex material, which is very often rubber gloves, but also that the cleaning agent very much becomes part of the soil, enters the earth, the water. So in a way also when we think about this, how the cleaning agent enters into the water that is then cleaned again and we drink it as drinking water. So we are very much connected in these cycles that are much larger than just bottles that we buy in a store. And I think this is what we started to talk about and wanted to use as a beginning for a conversation here, how what we might think is something, sorry, I'm almost done. So something that is actually very close to our homes, to our bodies, and may seem small in scale, has something to do with what we call planetary, and maybe we come back to that later, so we don't have to dwell on that right now.
It's a very different connection, because it was never kind of known how you actually not only store, but how do you, after using this, it just says wash it off with water. But where does it go? Even professional cleaning stuff is not kind of trained how to dispose of these materials, because it just says wash it off with water. There is one paper here that some of you might have noticed. It is here. It is kind of hidden, but not really hidden. This is the substance and what to do in case you really get in contact with it. We're talking about what is actually inside it. There is sulfamic acid, which is in some sense very similar to the acid which was used for digesting. So it's so strong, it has its pH value 1. And here, there's a small kind of warning, but also kind of input how to deal if you come in contact with it. And what is kind of when I was writing the concept of the work, or when I was trying to explain what the substance is and what it does, I always kind of used to come from my own, let's say, working experience, because. First of all, the people who go to who do this job, they're not trained to how to deal with these substances, and there should be some, as said, rubber gloves, and especially in this case with this cleaning agent, you should also have mask, and you should have eye protection, because actually you are not allowed to spray. It is most dangerous in the form of the aerosol. But still many work without any protection. So gloves, rubber gloves are a luxury most of the time here, which shouldn't be like this. And especially when such agents are used, it's people use them without actually knowing what they are having in their hands. So they inhale it, they spray it, because the companies usually like to let's say, save as much of the cleaning agent as possible. That's why they say, oh, you have to spray it. But actually, by spraying it, this is the most dangerous way to kind of work with it. But I mean, once again, we could invite you to have a look what it does to this structure, which kind of has calcium inside, like this fluid acid, and how it just dissolves this material.
Maybe just maybe we can just let the audience, or not all of them, know why you know so intimately about these cleaning agents, because you were just mentioning companies and what they tell you to do, and I think it would be maybe good to explain what kind of companies you were referring to, and also where your knowledge and expertise as a cleaning agent, so we are not talking about the liquid now, but you as a cleaning agent,
actually comes from? Because this is also how we met originally a couple of years ago.
This is how we met, yes. We met while I was studying at the academy, several first years of my studies, while I was as a third country national working as a cleaning lady and in different companies. And so I was there on training, and one of them where I was also, for example, learning about, basically learning in terms of you just have to read a black and white copy of some things that you probably, most of people haven't read because it's in German. Yeah, after this, so I kind of gathered my experience, my so-called expertise on doing this while I was kind of really included in this process, as many of my colleagues also on different levels were and still are. So it's not only a job of like underqualified staff, it's also a job that you as a like academic coming from a third country meets here in the Austrian society. So I kind of was so struck by this change in my, let's say, context that I had to kind of thematize this. So like there was this role of kind of on one side like this invisible labor, but okay paid, but like also very much underpaid. And on the other hand, like I was also studying at the most elitist institutions in Austria, which was the art academy, and how to work together with these two different roles was for me a challenge. That's why I kind of started working with these topics, and this is how I came into discussion with Elke, who also knows my like early work that also have like something to do with these topics as well.
Because when we met, you actually explained the color-coded system. So maybe you can share that with the others here, because that then went into your painting.
We have this interactive TV. Now, like, look, now it looks like it's real. And that I don't know how it actually works, but I will try to show you. The first one is loading.
You can just touch that and it will show.
Yeah, so this is Anežka kind of said like you should prepare the photos because we might need them. Yeah, so this system that I learned about during my studies and working process. There is a so-called four-color system used in professional cleaning, and when you go to this training and get your diploma, they kind of give you this black and white copy, and you can read from it if you kind of manage to read it, if you want to read it, if you can read it, as I said, because it's in German. You figure out that there is like this four-color system. What does this mean? This means that actually you have a cloth in four colors. And you also, related to this, there are also like different cleaning agents also in the color so that you don't mix them up. For example, this cleaning agent is in like kind of pink-red, so there is no variation between pink and red, but it's kind of, there's like red, green, yellow and blue. And then I really took like these elements that should depict the rooms that you clean with different cloths. And I painted these elements of the room and then I put them in space. So like with red cloth, I would clean the toilet. So like the color should depict like the part of the room that you shouldn't mix this cloth for example, cleaning the office table, because it's not hygienic. That's the whole point. And this cleaning agent goes in this direction of red-pink, which is used for like the like toilet area. And I mean, in some spaces like the toilet and the bathroom, they're like not split. For example, in Serbia, that's usually one room, but here in Vienna, I think those are two rooms. So you need two, let's say, parts to clean, or also two different agents cleaning agents to clean these parts of the space that are usually somehow in the, not only the office, but also like in the hospital. For example, this green, we have it here, the green kitchen, but if you work in a hospital, the green will depict the, like this, like the, how is it called, like storing, small storing spaces between the, lockers between the beds for the patients. Is like the green color, but others, so blue is always the office area, red is always like the toilet and the tiles, and yellow is always for the bathroom. So that's standard. And I always had, like, when I was kind of explaining this, people always used to tell me, oh yes, I saw in them, there's like some kind of different colors, I didn't know what they were for. So this system is kind of also applied in ordinary life, but not so strict as in like professional cleaning.
Can you also explain where that is? I mean, where the exhibition is here?
They're like in different spaces, but I guess that this one is most interesting. Those ones, because it's really hard, it was hard for me to present them in one single space. I kind of had to do like different parts or different colors in different spaces. But what I think that Elke would like me to talk about is that like this green part was presented as part of this I Know I Care group, which came about 2019 as part of the Vienna festival. It was an open working group for anyone who wanted to apply, and in the end there was like around 20 people who made together, who meet together, talk together, discussed with guests, and the final presentation was conceptualized around Waschhalle, or so-called like wash salon is the general term. That's a term of like usually I guess that everyone knows like wash salon as the like this museum at Karl Marxhof. But like wash salon is a place where in 100 years ago, in the times of Red Vienna, where the women were, it was a meeting place for women to clean, like to wash clothes together somehow. It was interestingly, like you would get out of the house just to like meet others in work somehow. Today they also have some versions of this. I mean, this specifically was the Waschhalle in the 10th district. That we could use for this exhibition, the real one. So when you enter, you would feel like the smell of the soap. It was very interesting. But anyway, yeah. So those were the places where women would meet and work together. But today it works a bit differently. Now you cannot even have access to this. It's managed by Wiener Wohnen, for example, as part of this like social housing rooms that no one like, and when people kind of started having like bathrooms and like washing machines at their home when they could actually afford this, they kind of stopped using these places. But some people still use it, and it's so interesting because it's mostly single men, like these common washing spaces. Like those are some things that are very interesting to discuss and think about at some point. Who actually uses these common washing rooms that you can only access with a specific card, and so you cannot. But like my view on the whole story is like single men like actually are using this today, which was a big shift somehow. So this is the 4-color system that also relates to this, because this work kind of came before, and then yes, I used like this relation or reference to the so the red part of the space here, and like use this specific cleaning agent called Betazid Rosso. It's like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't relate to this, but there's an interesting fact about this, which I know from my own experience, that like when you wear gloves, protective gloves, and you work with this, like you can get allergy, like completely, like, so when you work with it, I always used to have like, you know, till the gloves, like normal skin, but then it starts kind of expanding, so it's like really reacting to your skin, which is like, yeah. You see a proof here, not on the skin, luckily, but you kind of could still imagine.
I mean, what I find really interesting about your work is the way in which the material tells the story, but also it only tells the story if you share it. So I think this is for me always the kind of in a way challenge. How does one, so when we look at this, I mean, of course we see a basin and we see that the tiles are broken, and all of us can have our own associations and ways of thinking about that, or trying to feel what it might mean. I'm not saying that the work doesn't work. I mean, I think it works very well on its own. But then there is this other layer, and I think as a person who writes about art and architecture, I always find it a very challenging and also, let's say, troubling question to actually open up the material stories. I mean, how the form and the material, which are the basic components for a lot of art-making processes, begin to tell stories about larger environmental, and in your case about larger environmental and labor conditions, but I can only figure them out if I talk to the people who are the makers. And so I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but I just wanted to share that I feel for contemporary art writing or from contemporary architecture writing, it is really crucial to us people who study this and who are speaking about this or thinking about this, teaching this, to be in conversation with those who make and to understand the work together. I mean, to also understand how the work can, so that's maybe a personal interest, so that's maybe not a general interest, but how the work that we think with and think about can become part of larger conversations. So in this case, how can the work enter into conversations about, let's say, environmental activism, but also organizing labor conditions. And this is the part where I feel that in a way I would wonder how contemporary feminist art making is or is not connected to movements that are happening at this moment in time, and what these kinds of connections might look like. I mean, I think one example that you mentioned was actually the example of the Wienwoche, because it connected a number of people who were invited to think, as far as I know, about their conditions and their knowledges, in plural, of how they do care. I mean, like physical labor of caretaking, but also what the conditions of this work are, paid, unpaid, family, sharing it with others. So in a way you opened a space for people to reflect, but also to arrive maybe at a point to organize daily life differently. So moving from reflection to action, if you will, I mean, back and forth. On a scale that was, as far as I know, small, but what I find really admirable is that it was long-term. So it was meetings over time, building something that enabled these exchanges. But in a way, the larger conversation, so starting from the cleaning agent, to actually raise awareness just for the toxicity of this one cleaning agent that the work actually does beautifully, strongly, powerfully, but how will it speak to more people than us who are sitting here? I think this is one of the things that I'm grappling with or thinking about, or not that I think the answer can only be collective. It's not for any one person to give an answer to that, but maybe we can also shift the conversation to like more voices than just the two of us, and just bring in other ideas, not necessarily answers to what I was just raising as a question, but you're also invited to respond to that if you would like to, but maybe you have other questions to Jelena or to me or to each other, because I think a lot of you I don't know all of you, but I know some of you, and I know that you're working with questions and with themes that are touching upon material explorations, but also ways of connecting between what we call creative or artistic practices and other ways of relating to our broken world. And I think this is what I particularly like about this piece, that it's holding a broken world. I mean, it's still holding together, but the center is very much broken. So I think this is what I find a very powerful, I don't like to call it a metaphor, but it's, and I also don't like much the word representation, but I think it is it. I mean, it is this broken world in a certain way in material terms. But maybe we can just bring in more thoughts or ideas or expanding what the work invites us to think about or to question.
Yeah, I think you brought in several questions that were somehow one of these that we also talked about because Elke kindly accepted to write the text for my exhibition, which is at the moment happening in the Muzeum Gallery. And one of the topics that we discussed at this point was like how the feminist art work looks like today, according to which rules shall we judge whether something has like let's say or contains only on a visual level like feminist ideas, and in which way. And I think in my kind of sense it's very not characteristic in terms of like a historical way that like the feminist art was kind of looked like, or in some aspects looks like. And this is how the kind of whole discussion started. And the second thing is that like how could art making or art practice in which sense change something in the society? This is like a huge question that I always ask myself, and that I try to kind of investigate, because like I don't have like possibility to vote or to change anything politically in Austria, and like my ways are always like I always find some ways around to at least try to ask some questions or to raise them for like open discussion.
And did anyone recognize the color system from your exhibitions? Did some people say like,
I can tell you an example, like when I presented first the red part, like the toilet part in the exhibition localization that was made together with Jabůrková. People thought like red toilet, it has to be the critique of like communism. But then, precisely at this exhibition, which was at Stadtlabor Floridsdorf, there was a lady, she came in and she immediately recognized what this was. She said, I know what this was about, I was also cleaning. So it talks very much to the people who came with these topics, like somehow who had them, like who knew them from their daily life, but when it came to the, let's say like different, like official art circles or like some cultural context, people didn't really kind of, they couldn't rely on this experience. So that's why for them it could be only a metaphorical way to really kind of try to make sense out of it. So it really depends. It communicates much better with people who know this from their own life. And they get it immediately. I mean, I talk to them. I like to talk to people who come to the shows all the time. So they tell me things.
As far as I know, this is your second iteration of this piece. And I was just wondering, did the theme agent perform in the first iteration as well to ruin the the building between the tiles, or what happened there?
It started performing, but as this first piece was destroyed because of the storage, it was like inability to store it. It was 200 kilos, and it was in Belgrade. So we agreed with Anežka and to actually remake it. But this time it was like the concentrate, like there was like 1.5 gallons of this concentrated agent, and I think that was the reason why it started eating up more fast. I mean, it also happened right at the very beginning, at the opening, because now you cannot feel the smell because it's completely evaporated. But while like the people could come to the opening, it was very present. It was a very present smell, and then the whole room was really smelling for many days, especially because the wooden construction soaked part of it, so it was a disaster. Anežka used to always write me like, oh my god, it smells so much. And there are like people working here as well, like who come to work. I mean, okay, it was the lockdown, so it was maybe a bit good that like they were really not present in the room, but one of the things that we were really thinking about is how could people perform their daily work here while having this kind of smell, which is really irritating and present.
Also, a difference is that it was concrete construction, and I think that's why it didn't eat up so quickly with the material. And also because we wanted to keep
and to move it, to be able to move it
at
all.
The sculpture, we decided to do a lighter version, not with concrete, but with a wooden construction underneath. So that's why it also maybe eaten up, but also from the conversation and so on, the artwork speaks so much clearer now. And also maybe it's interesting that you can't buy the Petazit Rosso as a person. You have to buy it as an institution. So that's why I was able also to access it, that the Czech Center bought it.
For cleaning their own
purposes.
For their own cleaning purposes. Yes, that was also an interesting fact to mention. Yes, I agree. Mario and Žarko had questions.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, I think it was a nice color, this scene, and a lot of people audience enjoyed the color. That's not my question. My question is regarding the second scene. You are questioning yourself what sense does or what purpose art can have on certain topics. And as Elke said, if we have a broken world, if it's a question for assumption, then it's important that other pictures are existing. And who else, I'm asking myself, should do this? If not, for example, you are representing us, the color system and the sculptures, and as like I said, these materials, these forms are telling stories. And this is, I think, I'm asking myself, is this the purpose of art? To have a kind of mirror, a reflection of our broken world, or however we want to see the world, is it a reflection? And I just wanted
I think it's definitely a reaction to something that is happening to us. You know, like I somehow always dreamed about coming to Vienna and becoming an abstract painter. You know, but then I was immersed in reality. But I think that I really kind of there was like this. I was kind of existentially struck very much by some conditions that I was kind of immersed in as a third country national. But I think that in my work I still try to keep my interest in I don't know, post-painterly abstraction, in like color field painting, in minimalism, you know, like all the things that I appreciate very much aesthetically and also conceptually, but then there's also reality. And how can I just ignore reality and go become an abstract painter? And then I really started myself, is it enough to be an abstract, you know, like how do I would feel bad not to address this, but I would also feel bad also to address it. But I think I've overcome this moment of, you know, I don't feel bad for addressing this anymore. Like, I think it's a very important topic for many, and if I could somehow start or like make someone kind of start thematizing their own experiences, which are maybe similar to me or completely different, you know, I'm happy that, you know, that it kind of could have some impact in any sense.
I think that it will be a follow-up what somehow Professor Krasny already said. I'm interested to hear from you, to whom do you try to speak when you, or to present these works, because is it a kind of a self-reflection, as you said, a mirror, or you want to do the intervention in the world? And I'm noticing in the art world and in academia a lot of exhibitions and books that are thematizing executive care and all those things that you are pointing out. But at the same time, when I'm speaking with my friends who are cleaning ladies, they are saying that their working conditions are even worse than they were like several years ago, because now they're outsourced, they're working for the super cool institution, but still they don't have a, for example, I don't know, urlaub or something like that. So do you want to interfere with the reality, or you just want to reflect the broken reality? That's my question.
I would like to interfere as much as I can. I'm aware that, of course, it could be much more. Yeah, I think that like somehow I'm also an artist. Like, I'm not a social worker, or I don't work in the like Arbeiterkammer. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not like I really don't have skills to do something better than this in a sense. But I have the need, obviously, to at least address the questions around labor and care, but from a bit different perspective than what is like kind of cool at the moment in the academia. And I find Elke Krasny like one of the people who really kind of have like, I support her point of discussing, like, perspective of discussing all of these issues that like I usually don't support this, let's say, perspectives on, because, you know, like, you could call an exhibition radical care, but still make exhibition which is like, for me, considered as like liberal feminism. Yes. We can maybe also go in this discussion, but I don't know whether it makes sense.
Maybe I will note also from the curatorial side, it's not just about the artist and the artwork, it's also about the Kunstvermittlung, you know, like changing the spaces where you do the exhibition, which in Czech National Cultural Institute, which doesn't have usually like an intellectual crowd of artistic, contemporary artist visitors. It's quite a disparate group of people which is attending different shows. And then it's the part of Kunstvermittlung, of communicating with the people, within the institution. On the part of the institution, of the National Institute, also inviting other national institutes, which are the representative of other cultural institutes, which came to see the exhibitions. There are going to be also meetings of the representatives of the...
Doing press rings.
Yeah. So you also communicate and with the people that are coming, but also with the cleaning staff that actually came during the exhibition. And the girls that are also working here were trained to be able to speak about each of the artworks. So I think it's always a network of happenings around the exhibition, about the sculpture, around the artist, and so on. And it's always difficult to get the topic to as many people as is possible, but it's also targeting different people and trying to make the language of the artwork transmittable or understandable to others.
What did the technician tell you in relation to this question? So, like, he told you that you are trying to make revolution.
Yeah.
By bringing like contemporary topics into like the national cultural center. Yes, that was a comment from the technician.
I think the question I had before is very close to what you were saying, and I guess the point I was trying to think about is so one side of the communication is to speak with people about what this work or other works, what kinds of meanings they have. But I think the title of our conversation today, Cleaning Agents, very much points to the question or the desire of agency. So what is the kind of agency that people who gather together around these objects that are in these spaces that we call art spaces, then take away from having engaged with these objects? So how do they become aesthetic and social and political drivers, if you will? And I guess that's a slightly larger question than the one you asked, even though it can overlap or even coincide. I mean, I'm not saying that what is called art mediation or Kunstvermittlung cannot do that, but I also think that the last 30 decades have seen a almost near complete commodification of art mediation, as I would say a taming of artworks and keeping them inside what we call the so-called, with Danto, the so-called art world. And so I think when Sarah Ahmed, she has written a number of really beautiful books, and you might all be familiar with her, so I'm just reminding maybe those who haven't read her work. She has written books like Leading a Feminist Life or Queer Phenomenology. She describes how, in this book, Queer Phenomenology, how objects have the power to gather. I mean, so in a way, going back to this description in Hannah Arendt, when there is a table and people are held together by the table, and when you take the table away, the people are no longer connected. They are just isolated. And so here, when we find ourselves surrounding this whatever pool-like object, the object also holds us together in a certain way. And it's not that we wouldn't be connected any longer. It's not quite the same as a table is, but I think what an artwork does more than a table, because the table has just the functional, let's say, purpose of not maybe holding us together, but offering a surface where we can put something to then eat, blah, blah, blah. But so here, what holds us together is actually the meaning production that we can do collectively and not just as individuals, or not just one art mediator explains to us what the meaning is. And I think this is, if we take that seriously, or if there is a possibility of how life, I mean, just dreaming out loud, how life in society is being organized, that there is more time for having these moments of being together and thinking with these objects, I think is a big step in all kinds of directions. I mean, it can work politically, but it also can just bring joy. I mean, it's not necessarily always directly related to something that we would call a political struggle. I wouldn't, in any way want to reduce it to this. But what I do find interesting vis-a-vis this specific object is the very toxicity of this agent. So how could this become, let's say, an object that is being used in order to warn people. No, I mean, I don't want my skin to look like this. I mean, honestly, it's so if I look at these tiles and what they look like after 3 days, and if you think then what this does to your own body or to the surface of the planet, then I think it becomes more powerful in being related to something differently. So how could we, so maybe naively the question, but I'm still asking this, how could we use an object like this to prevent cleaning companies from actually buying these cleaning agents and actually pressurizing them into buying other cleaning agents that are less toxic? And I'm pretty sure there are less toxic agents. I mean, one has to be able to find something that doesn't ruin the tiles after 3 days. And so I think this is something where I would see that the work can actually have the unfolding of an agency that goes beyond the containment in an art space. But I also think it takes a lot of people we might want to call mediators. I mean, it takes more than one person to do this kind of labor. So the artwork cannot do it alone, the artist cannot do it alone. I think it takes a lot of hours and intensity and also wanting to do that kind of work. And this is something that can maybe be thought about here in this space, how you also as curators would see possibilities to do precisely that, or to think about art mediation in these categories in the future. But maybe other people also want to add something to that. There's 2 people at the same time. So
I just wanted to ask, as I understood the artwork happens decided by itself how it would be. So it was not your first intention to. So you saw it later that this happened. So the first intention was to fill it with this pink.
And it was filled for the first 3 days.
So you were. So this was your how you dreamt about how you.
I was more concentrated on the smell, that you can really. There was like this moment where you could feel this toxicity still in space because of the smell, but now you can actually see it in a sense. So it changed its form on its own. I mean, even one day we had to do the cleaning intervention, and because it's really when this agent ate the pool, it started like, it was completely in the whole space. So we had we had to clean around what it made itself. So yes, it wasn't planned, but then there was a decision to keep it like this. So instead of like the smell, so it was just the other sense of like seeing it, how it works.
Yes, I just wanted to say that somehow it happened. It was.
It misbehaved.
I mean, it's a cleaning agent. So
Yes, true.
I think Karin wanted to say something.
I'm still struck with this kind of like language that you created also with the image behind you right now. And because what it also does to the visitor, I mean, like it makes me actually aware that I'm obviously not a person with this particular cleaning experience, so that I could read that. So I also like wonder how it makes you being able or give you the agency to speak to like people with different cleaning experiences differently. I think that's very interesting because it also like I have to reflect myself, I have to position myself in a way. And I also like wonder with this piece actually, like how does this allow you to speak to different people differently? Because for example, like I'm trained as architect, so I was like fascinated from the beginning, and I also found it like aesthetically appealing, so I could touch it. But then I also realized, something with real basic has happened here. Maybe I shouldn't have touched it. Sorry for touching it. But I kind of like privileged exhibition of exhibition visitors. So I wanted to say, I just wanted to ask if you could say more about that, and if that is why we have plans with that afterwards also.
It also includes, but at the same time it excludes, of course. Yes, but but I think precisely it makes you rethink your role, and like, this is not talking to me. I'm offended, kind of, you know. Like, he talks to someone else, and like, I'm here and I'm seeing it, and maybe the other person who is just there to really clean around it is addressed, actually. So who is actually here addressed, and in which way, is also a huge question, because I don't think that like cleaning ladies directly kind of addressed either, because I guess mostly she wouldn't even pay attention to this, what she's doing, you know. So there are like many problems here in many ways to talk about this, and for whom, you know. Like, we didn't come here at 5:30 to talk while the cleaning lady is there, you know, and kind of doing her job, or we didn't talk to her what, you know, her thoughts would be like. I mean, maybe we should have invited her, you know, like, so that she talks about it. There are too many questions, of course. I mean,
but there are a lot of potential shifts, I think, in this kind of like, and also these very small nuances that you can do with this kind of language. So I'm just thinking about more and more nuances. Yeah, thank you for that.
I really wanted to say something.
I would use a term for a work, for a sculpture, which is not for me. This sculpture for me reminds me of an open form. Open form is a sculpture, and this is used in architecture. And this open form allows this work to be a table, as I said, because it's open. Everybody can say something. Well, I am talking something, and this is, I think, the purpose of art. And as you before mentioned, a cleaning lady came to you and said, "Oh, this reminds me of something." And I think this is not this, it's one of the things we as artists can and should do. And if we stop to do this, then it's getting politically and this is boring. But I said, this is our task to make open things. Yes.
I think that somehow the people who make art, or like try to do some actions that could become art or not, and people who write about these actions, I think they could also come together and discuss some things, how it could go further for each part of the thing, you know. And I think there is still place and like a possibility for a exchange, you know, that could bring to something, some new ideas or some new approaches. And I mean, I think it's good to start discussing, to meet and start talking about it, and then I'm sure there could be some ways that could develop from this. I think that's also one of the points, in a sense.
I mean, what I find really interesting is this, this art historian, T.J. Demos. I mean, he works a lot on ecology, on environment. He has written a book called Against the Anthropocene, and now another one, Beyond the World's End. And in this last one, Beyond the World's End, he talks about how the turn to abstraction has been maybe one of the the challenges within art history that art became less and less and less understandable. I mean, so I'm putting it very simple. I mean, his argument is much more elaborate. And I think what I like about your work, that it, as you were saying before, it is abstract, but at the same time it is very concrete. So it is not just because you used concrete as a material, but it is very concrete in the sense that there are concrete labor conditions that are being addressed, very specific readings, and I'm not entirely sure I would fully agree with the openness. I mean, I think it's there, so of course, as always, I mean, we all have our ideas and our knowledges with which we come, and this is what art opens up. So with that part, I would agree. But I would say there is also a very specific way in which these works are composed and strategically composed, I would say. And that's what I tried to say before. This is something that with these kinds of works can, I think, only be understood in conversations with the work, with the makers, but also in learning more about the actual materials that are being used. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that as people who think about that, we need. So I don't know enough about these materials. I'm not an expert on materials or on materiality. And I think that's actually a very big gap in people who write about or with art. I mean, they don't really treat art as material culture or as part of material culture, but investigating that a lot more and understanding the meaning of these materials as they connect art back to the world, which was one of the huge questions of the entire 20th century. How does art relate to the world or to life? And in a way, understanding these relations and the relatedness or the interconnectedness through the materiality itself, I think this is something that I find most interesting at this moment in time, where we are now in this anthropogenic condition, where we have understood that as human beings, because of the Anthropocene, we have become a geological force unwillingly, maybe not even intentionally, but now we are no longer just human beings, we are geosocial beings. And so if we take these kinds of works that are very concrete and relate them back into the material conditions that have taken us into our current predicament, I think this is what I find really interesting. So to learn with the materiality, but also to learn how makers like you think the meaning in connection with very concrete, let's say, conditions of social life, of labor, of working, and of bringing this together in letting it have a form. And I guess that's something that I find surprising that I'm saying this. I mean, I guess for many decades I was more fascinated with things that were very conceptual when it came to art making, and that were very concrete when it comes to architecture, which is kind of the other big field that I'm looking at and researching on. And now I find it really interesting how material things have the power to let us learn about the condition of our planet. So I guess as learning objects or as learning agents, I find these objects extremely useful and extremely powerful. And the kind of work we can do around it, which is something I had tried to say before, so I don't want to go on with this. I think we have questions.
I have a question regarding general structure, because have you ever had a chemist visit your exhibition? The whole process of mortar being dissolved by this cooling agent is organic chemistry. So wouldn't it be interesting to see what a chemist does the whole thing with the art installation altogether?
It would be interesting for the first time that the work was constructed. I consulted a person who is a chemist, and unfortunately she couldn't come to the opening, but she was more worried about protecting the people who would be in the space. That was one of the things, that was one of the worries, and it was always like, open the windows and don't put it in the space which is, you know, smaller than 25 square meters and stuff like this. And it's really the concentration in the air of the thing. Like it's, I mean, it's not dangerous. We were really talking in terms of that it's just lying in the space. It's dangerous when it's kind of sprayed, but like no one was spraying it. And in that sense, that was the argument for actually keeping it in the space. But like it also evaporates. So the suggestion was to always keep the window open.
Okay, because like when you mix vinegar with baking soda, you do get actually also like this dissolving agent.
Yes, yes.
It's very interesting.
I think we have time for a last question. We've been speaking for almost an hour, so I think if there's a last question, that can be nice.
What are you thinking of, like, will you continue to work on this object? If so, what are your plans or thoughts of, will you include everything that happens? Will this transform it or change it?
I mean, it's a question of, now the decision was to keep it as it is in order to show some processes that happened in the meantime. The way to work with it, I think it's like, I couldn't say that I will be working concretely on this work, on this piece, but I think that like the way that I was very much interested in this process and how this agent was behaving in a sense. So this is some interest that I would like to pursue. Also in my other exhibition there was like a set of like bottle cap rings that I connected, and kind of my idea was that it will really stand straight, but it didn't. It had its own way of behaving in the space. And this is what I should really kind of think about in the future, how to allow these materials to behave the way they want to behave, and still use them in my work, but without, you know, additionally wanting to change them or reshape them or stage them or something, but like somehow to allow the material speak for itself even more. Not like, you know, because I found myself kind of, I was projecting how I think it should react, you know, like also here, also there. But then I figure out, why am I doing this? You know, I should just really learn from it in a sense. So also allow it, you know, allow my kind of presumptions to completely, you know, evaporate, and just allow it, you know, behave the way it wants, and somehow work with this still. In that sense, yes, I see the continuation of the working process.
May I just comment on this, because I think that artists are very often doing that, but I would really like to comment. I think that this idea of anthropomorphizing the materiality is not, I would say, this good way to, you know, like think and tell the story about it, because you set up the condition and they just behave on the principle of physics. They don't have their real power or something, so it is always the artist or the condition or the institution that set the initial conditions, let's say, and then the materiality shows us something. But I really am against this kind of, okay, they behave in certain way or something.
Yeah, it is physics, yes, I agree, of course, some part of it is definitely physics, but also I constructed it in the way that I think, you know, it will react. So I constructed it according to my thoughts and my kind of experiences, or maybe kind of, not suggestions, but like, it was my idea to construct it that way, because I thought it would behave that way, but actually there is physics, there is like the material, which is like, for example, plastic, so it also means that if I want to, for example, really shape it the way that I think that it should be shaped, I should investigate the material and know it even better, like even more, like it's not that I was just kind of explaining it a bit like symbolically or like plastically, so to say. I don't think that the material is alive in that sense, of course. Not that. Yes, and I don't think that I think that I'm not doing any mystification here either, which is somehow I think demystification is a very huge part of my work, I would say.
I will just quickly comment on what she said, because I kept thinking about materiality, agency, and I was now reading a lot about forensic architecture, and it was maybe like moving agency is opening new forums, and actually in real life we have this materiality, this change that we can archive, which we can document, which we can present, which we can invite chemists, and maybe create an agency by creating a new forum, maybe book, or maybe going to some cleaning agency or cleaning or institution that is dealing with this, and maybe that's just my thoughts on the part you do.
I think it's really interesting because what they are mostly researching at the moment is tear gas. I mean, this is what forensic architecture is following at the moment. So the production of tear gas, but also how the way in which, I think this is what Weizmann now stresses, particularly how we have to study architecture in its gaseous form. So when it has been blown up after explosions, and it's still architecture, but what does it do to the lives of people, and how can we, I mean, they work in a way differently, I would say, because they use the notion of the architectural model as a forensic method. So to build a model of something that is happening in the real world, rather than using the model as something that will then be built, which is an architectural process. So that's what they have been doing for years. But what I really like when you said we make a link to them is, so the aerosols of this cleaning agent, I mean, what kind of toxic impact does it have, and what kind of modeling would we need in order to make this a very powerful tool for producing evidence, which is what forensic architecture does. I mean, they produce evidence to be used in court. I mean, that's where they take their work. Human rights courts, but also other types of legal fora. So if we were to take that cleaning agent to a legal forum in order to understand how toxic it actually is, I mean, how many plants have been killed by this cleaning agent? I have no idea, but we can ask the question, how many people have had lung diseases because of it? So I think if we use it as a starting point to investigate this specific cleaning agent that also destroyed this object to a degree. So I think that's how I would like to think with what you were saying. And then you can build a community of people who are working against this cleaning agent and the impact it has on bodies and the environment. So I think it would be fantastic to do that, but it also, forensic architecture is not one person. I mean, it's a whole group of people, lots of students. I mean, there's a lot of, it's a collective body. So I think that's something that we have been talking about a lot today. It cannot be, so I think the notion of the artist as an individual bringing about change, I think that's a very outdated, modern, heroic idea. Not that the artist is no longer an individual, of course they are, and they produce, but that the work they do can produce what the work can produce needs more than one person. And organizing that, I think, takes other means of thinking with these objects, to use them as evidentiary, if that's an adjective, I'm not really sure, but as objects that produce evidence beyond the aesthetic paradigm of art making. And so I think in that sense this is an object of evidence. But in order to use it as such, we need other types of writing, other types of investigation, we need to bring in the chemists and so on and so forth, other types of epistemic navigations. In a way. Should we stop here? Well, thank you for coming. It's not for me to have the last word. I'll give the last word to the curators.
Yes. I mean, if we don't have, if no one has any more questions or anything else to add, I would finish this now. And thank you all for coming. Thank you to Professor Krasny and to Jelena for taking the time for us. And yeah, I wish you all, I don't know, a wonderful holiday season. And see you later.
And also maybe an invitation to new events, because the exhibition is going to be also in January and February, and hopefully no other lockdowns will come. But we are very hopeful, but also know what's being said in the media. But we start off on the 10th of the 11th with Heigh-ho, that's a Czech filmmaker, and she's going to show her documentary about the 5 worst paid jobs in the Czech Republic. And we are also going to talk about her podcast series about the life, how the life of the people, of the working people, those with in precarious working conditions changed during the pandemic. And also she's now doing another documentary, and that's about this transnational workers. So that's on 10th, and we have also other program which you can see, take the leaflet from the exhibition, and then everything is written and it's set in stone. Just this one was moved also, like Jelena's artist with Elke, this shifted the date. So I would be very happy if you come and are as engaged as during today's conversation. And I would like to thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you also in next year. And also I think Miljana is going to stay here a little bit, so if you have any questions you can approach them. And thank you. I'm glad.